Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the February 12th, 2019 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call tonight's meeting to order. Thank you for braving the elements to join us this evening. Glad to see so many of you in the audience. If you haven't already had a chance to do so, there are copies of our agenda on either side of the room on the conveniently placed shelves. Feel free to pick one up and you can follow along with tonight's proceedings. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on tonight's agenda, as well as a segment under item 4, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature. At that point in the evening, if anyone has any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to things that are not on tonight's agenda, I will welcome you to the podium and we'd love hearing from you at that time. But first, it is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so I would ask everyone present to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Terrific. Thank you very much. I'd now like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll. Good evening.
Good evening. Commissioner Wallace? Here. Commissioner Earl? Here. Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3, which pertains to minutes of past council meetings. We have one set of minutes to approve tonight. Those are the minutes from our regular council meeting of February 5th, 2019. If there are no questions, concerns, comments, or conclusions, I would ask for a motion to approve those minutes, please.
Martel, I move the council approve the meeting minutes from February 5th, 2019 as presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The ayes have it, the minutes are approved. Just like that, we are at item 4. If you'll remember, I described item 4 as the point in our meeting when we entertained public comments of a general nature with respect to things that are not on tonight's agenda. If there are any members of the audience who would like to make a comment or ask a question of a general nature with respect to something not on tonight's agenda, please come to the podium as this young lady is doing right now, and we'll welcome hearing from you. Good evening.
Good evening. I don't know about young, but good evening, Mayor Tully and Commissioners. My name is Amy Gasson. I live at 5320 Benton Avenue. I currently serve as Vice President of the Downers Grove Historical Society, and I am here tonight to let you know about some exciting developments regarding the Historic Home Program, also known as the HHP. The HHP is an honorary recognition program that we co-sponsor with the Downers Grove Museum, which, as you all know, is owned by the Downers Grove Park District. This program aims to preserve the history and integrity of Downers Grove's homes, as well as educate the community about research and preservation. A home must be at least 50 years old to apply for recognition, and if an application is approved, a plaque can be purchased for the house. Up until now, if a homeowner wanted a plaque, they needed to purchase that plaque themselves. I'm happy to announce that we have come to an agreement with the Downers Grove Museum, and starting this year, our two organizations will pay for the plaque of any approved applications. In addition to this, the Downers Grove Historical Society will begin giving a free 1-year membership to all homeowners whose applications are approved. Among some of the benefits of being a member of the Downers Grove Historical Society is being able to attend each of our quarterly events at no cost. Speaking of our educational events, our first one of the 2019 series is being held Thursday, March 7th at 6:30 p.m. at Emmett's. The presentation will be by architect Don Rickard, who will tell the story of his home, a bungalow he designed and had built on Main Street just north of Prairie Avenue. I'm sure you all recognize Don as the chairman of our Downers Grove Plan Commission. The cost for the event is $10 for non-members, and all members are free. Perhaps the best news is that your first drink is on us, so come. And if you would like more details or to register for the event, please go to downersgrovehistory.org. Thank you.
Terrific. Good to see you. Thank you for sharing that with us tonight. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to items of a general nature, things that are not on tonight's agenda? All right, very well. Thank you for those that did speak. And it'll bring us to item 5, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Martel, I move the council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to any items on tonight's consent agenda? Questions or comments from members of the village council? I'm sorry. Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Wallace? Aye. Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the consent agenda passed unanimously. That brings us to our active agenda. We have 2 items on tonight's active agenda, items 6A and 6B. We'll begin with item 6A. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending parking permit provisions for residents in the Village of Downers Grove?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance amending parking permit provisions for residents as presented.
Second.
And you have to say parking permit provisions 10 times fast. No. Any questions or comments from members of the audience on this item? Questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Earl, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. There were some questions about details. Manager Fielden, maybe you could explain the resident parking in the deck for the downtown residents?
Yes, this is to do with what we call Lot R permit parking. It's located on the first floor of the parking deck. It allows residents of the downtown who don't otherwise have parking resources to purchase parking permits from us, and they can park overnight in the deck. The change we're making here is there are a couple of newly constructed, recently approved residential developments in the downtown which provide their own parking. And we want to make sure that all those spaces are used prior to looking for permits in our deck. So at this point, this ordinance would result in those 2 or 3 developments not being eligible for Lot R permits. It's really just making sure that all the private spaces are maximized before the public spaces are utilized.
And that's going to be really important when we have to start juggling some of the parking with our new Village Hall development, because that's some of the parking issues are going to get a little bit more complex.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, that matter passes unanimously and brings us to item 6B as in boy. Do I have a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing an agreement with Leopardo Companies, Inc. for pre-construction services for the Village Facilities Project? Hold on a second. Before you do that, I just want to say that again. I really just want to say this again. Do I have a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing an agreement with Leopardo Companies, Inc. for pre-construction services for the Village's Facilities Project?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Wait,
Just
Oh,
wanted to
sorry.
know if you wanted to say it again, because
Are there any questions on the resolution authorizing an agreement with Leopardo Companies, Inc. for pre-construction services for the Village Facilities Project?
No.
All right, hearing no questions, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Very pleased to hear that that passes unanimously and off to the races.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our active agenda, and on to item 7, which is our first reading or our workshop agenda. We have several items under that portion of tonight's meeting. Our first reading or our workshop agenda is a little bit different than the active agenda that we just went through. These items are for presentation and discussion purposes only. There is no final action taken on any of these items tonight. Typically what we do is start off by asking village staff to introduce the item for council discussion, and ask the council if they have any questions of staff or comments to make, and then we'll open it up for any audience participation, and then we'll come back to the village council. So it's a little bit different than what we just went through. So with that, I'll turn things back over to our village manager, David Fieldman. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Tully. Thank you so much. We do have 3 agenda items on our first reading tonight. However, there are 2 topics for discussion. The first 2 items concern regulations of the sale of cats and dogs. This item will be presented by our management analyst, Dan Carlson.
Good evening, Mr. Carlson. Your first world tour went so well, they brought you back for another one.
Yeah, I guess I didn't do so bad, did I then? So, good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. At the January 8th, 2019 meeting, village staff presented potential options for regulating the sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits in the village of Downers Grove. After council deliberation and public comment, the council directed staff to draft an ordinance restricting the retail sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits in the village of Downers Grove, and to draft a resolution in support of Senate Bill 2280. Now, the proposed ordinance would prohibit pet stores to sell dogs, cats, or rabbits in the village of Downers Grove unless the animals are obtained from an animal care facility, animal rescue organization, or humane society. In addition, any retail pet store that sells a dog, cat, or rabbit must provide written disclosure that shall be signed by the retailer and customer at the time of sale. The retailer shall retain the original copy of such a disclosure for 2 years after the time of sale, and the original copy shall be made immediately available to an authorized village official upon request. Happiness's Pets, located at 605 Ogden Avenue, is the only retail pet store that sells dogs, cats, and rabbits in the village of Downers Grove. The owner of Happiness's Pets recently moved the store to its current location and has invested resources into upgrading the facility. The store also has a lease agreement for this property ending on December 31st, 2022. The proposed ordinance establishes an amortization period which would allow Happiness's Pets to operate with its current business model until the lease expires on December 31st, 2022. Senate Bill 2280 includes regulations for the sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits in DuPage and Will counties. This bill would allow pet shop operators to offer a dog, cat, or rabbit for sale only if the pet shop operator has obtained the dog, cat, or rabbit from an animal care facility operated by a subdivision of local, state, or federal government, in addition to a specified animal rescue organization. There is no timetable for consideration for Senate Bill 2280, and this bill has been referred to Senate assignment with no further action taken. Like the mayor said, this is a first reading for these 2 agenda items at this time, and myself and village staff would be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the summary. Greatly appreciate it. With that, I will open it up for discussion by the council. Obviously, we've had a number of conversations about this topic leading up to tonight. We've had a tremendous amount of input from both the community and well beyond, as well as from a number of organizations that make it their focus to provide information and to advocate for this topic. So needless to say, I think we've all received a great deal of information. Previous request was made of village staff, as was mentioned, to prepare some ordinances for us to actually consider, which is the first time we have them before us. Again, no final action will be taken tonight, but what I'd like to accomplish is for the council, after discussion and interaction, provide the staff with some direction as to what it would be that we would like to have come before us for a vote down the road. I think there's a few issues here that may warrant some discussion. Ultimately, I'd like to get consensus or direction from at least the majority of the council as to any details that we might have here. So with that introduction, just giving everybody a heads up that I would like to actually get some direction at the end of the evening. I don't think we'll be voting on this.
March 5th.
Yeah, the earliest would be March 5th, but because of our meeting schedule and some other things, but some direction would be appreciated. So with that, I will open it up to my colleagues for questions, comments, or you can just answer the questions. Who wants to start? Commissioner Waldeck, you look very pensive. How are you this evening?
Thank you, and very pensive. We've met a number of times on this, and apparently it wasn't Gandhi or Humphrey, but some very wise man who said the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way it treats its animals. I think that's a very wise statement. And we're not talking about defective dolls or the Thanksgiving lettuce where we threw out millions of dollars of lettuce not knowing where exactly that lettuce came from. Whether it came from Mexico or Georgia or California. Didn't know it was all tossed away. It was defective. And eventually it was found to be a section of California. But we don't tolerate defective products. And I think that's what we're dealing with here. We believe that animals, dogs, cats, rabbits, are capable of love, and therefore we ought to love them and care for them. We have a process that included whole or in part cruelty, like treating a mother as a machine to produce a product until it no longer can. It's finally sold for profit. Animals are held in spaces that are small, they're maybe improperly shipped. There's a whole problem with the supply chain, and it's all about profit. And we need to address these things. Each time we've discussed this matter, there's been a number of people. Usually we get about 10 people at a council meeting if we're lucky. And in the past, we've had almost a full room, 70-80% full. We have a pretty good turnout tonight. We've had emails going back months, a lot of emails. It isn't dribs and drabs. They're constantly coming in, asking us to address this issue. And there's people at home. Well, usually the people at home either don't know what's going on or they kind of go, or if they kind of know about it, they go, well, it'd be nice if they do something right. And so looking at that and looking at the proposed ordinance that we have, well, the way things have turned out, it seems like it's been like the Downers Grove version of a march. We don't take to the streets, we come to meetings, we write emails, we weigh in, and in any march, there's usually two questions that are asked. Somebody shouts out, what do you want? And then they say, well, we want increased wages, or what do you want? We want release of political prisoners. What do you want? We want peace. In this case, we want a humane ordinance. But what's important is the second question, and the second question is, when do you want it? And you always hear, when do you want it? The answer is now. And I've never heard of a peace march where they said, what do you want, peace? When do you want it? Oh, give us a couple years, we'll think about it. That's not the way it should work. And I fear that we have an ordinance, a proposed ordinance that hopefully we can change in this first reading to address the situation. Don't pat yourselves on the back if the ordinance passes. You know, you may feel good and go home. The people who send in emails may be happy that they send in emails and think they got something for it. They didn't, because the way it's written, it isn't going to take place for 4 years. You have one business that has a reputation. We've heard from a number of people, and I've heard from somebody I know and trust very well, who actually worked there several years ago and quit because of the conditions. The conditions of the animals. She referred to it even back then as a puppy mill. So to go home and think you've accomplished something, that's the first half of the ordinance. The second half is, how are we going to amortize this? What's acceptable? Is it 4 years? Are we going to allow this to continue? We admit that there's cruelty. We admit there's something wrong. But we don't want to fix it for 4 years, for 2 years, for a year, 90 days, 60 days. I could probably live with. But to go that long, to admit that there's a cruelty and not do anything about it is just beyond me. And so I think it's important that we address and reduce the amortization process, Mayor. And that's what I'm looking for in the next ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I get it that you're okay with the language of the ordinance itself, it's just the timing of its implementation?
The amortization, correct.
And what period would you like?
I would say not more than 60 days for them to change their model and so that they have a chance. And I'm willing, if the Humane Society or Anti-Cruelty Society or some such organization would approve their supply chain, that I could take as well. So say not more than 60 days and or approval of their supply chain, so we aren't getting puppies that are abused. Thank you. Or any other animals, cats, rabbits.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. I think the timing is pretty straightforward. I'm not so sure whether the approval language wouldn't require some more tweaking of the ordinance, but we can address that later as needed. Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, comments from members of the council at this point? Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. I share Commissioner Waldek's concern about the supply chain. As I've said at other meetings, I am in favor of an ordinance of this nature. I don't necessarily want to go down any details about stories we've heard or things like that, but suffice it to say that even if Happiness is Pets does absolutely everything perfectly, the next business that opens up of this nature may not. And I believe that situation to be unacceptable. I stand in favor of the ordinance. I'd like to see a shorter amortization period. What exactly that works out to be, I'm willing to be flexible on. And I understand the concerns and the reasons why it was drafted the way it is currently. And I appreciate those concerns, but I would like to see it shortened if possible. And I will leave my comments at that. But I'm in favor of the ordinance. In addition, I'm sorry, we received a couple of comments about the fine structure. If there were a way to increase the fine from the $75, perhaps make it per animal. I understand it is a daily violation, and those can compound, which is good, but $75 does seem a little low as a starting point. So those are my comments at the moment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Earl.
I just want to say that I have received, these are email addresses from everybody who's written. More email on this than we've gotten on anything since I've been sitting up here. And I'm glad people are so involved. I do not support the length of time that was proposed in this ordinance for the amortization period. It absolutely needs to be shorter. How short that is, between 5 or 6 months and the end of the year. I'm open 60 days. I'm fine with. The shorter the better. I think that we need to tighten up some of the language when it comes to what exactly is a humane society. There's a definition, a state definition that I think we can pull from so that we can tighten up that language. But as far as I'm concerned, the sooner the better. And I have had also comments that are in favor of people, or people in favor of this remaining as it is. And I think to those people, I say if this had been a car dealership that was selling defective cars, if this had been anything else that was out there in our community and had a track record of being so detrimental to our community and in a way that pulls at the heartstrings of our community on top of it and is selling defective products with not much recourse when you fall in love with something that's cute and fluffy and it becomes part of your family, and then there is no way to extricate yourself from the nightmare of vet bills and everything that comes after that. That it's not good for this community, that it's not good for the well-being of anybody, including the pets that are forced to live in the horrible conditions until you take them home and give them a loving home. And sadly, I know the story to be true because I lived through it, but they do have a way of marking down pets, and if they don't go, then they put these pets down because nobody wants them. It's not not every dog, not every cat, not every pet that is up for sale winds up with a good home, and we have a lot of organizations out there that are striving to give every pet the best home that they can find them. But if these are just commodities to the people who are selling them and they're breed them as fast as they can and get them out the door as fast as you can. One of the somewhat surprising statistics is they actually sell 1.8 puppies a day out of this store in Downers Grove. And that's a lot of puppies, and these puppies aren't cheap. And if you think about that, obviously some of them have to be good dogs. They can't all be bad dogs. But what's the percentage? You don't really know. And by and large, myself included, have had bad experiences with some of the dogs that have come from this place being unwell, being not healthy, and having been turned over to humane societies and having to have found other homes. And it's not in the best interests or the well-being of anyone except for the people who are making the profits on selling these dogs. So I do support this ordinance. I support fast amortization period, as fast as possible, but I will be willing to go as far as 6 months or to the end of the year. I understand they have a lease. That's unfortunate. But we've been threatened with lawsuits, and whether or not this is a worthy challenge to take on, I believe it is. I believe it is worth going to the mat for this. We have been sued as a village over a lot of things, and this would be something that I would be out there in favor of taking the risk and trying to make us a better community. So that's all I have to say for now, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner White?
First, I just want to bring up a few. I'm generally in favor of the ordinance. Here's a couple of technical comments. I agree with some modifications to the definition of humane society. I want to take a look at the penalties. I think we can do that without a whole lot of difficulty. On the amortization period, actually, and this is actually something that no one else has brought up. When this was first raised on new business, we were given, back in October, we were given the U.S. Humane Society model ordinance, and that just has an outright ban on retail sales. And the concern that I have is having the village responsible for policing sourcing, that's a task that may not be easy to do. You know, how much time do we spend verifying that, that the potential retail sale complies with the standards that we put? So the most recent version of the U.S. Humane Society model ordinance has a complete ban on the retail sale. And if we believe as a question of cruelty it's wrong to have this be a for-profit business, then it's wrong. They can facilitate adoptions if that's the way it is. So I'd like council's sense on, the state of California just passed it the way that we're looking at it, where you can sell puppies and that come from appropriate rescue organizations. But my understanding is the Humane Society is going to go a little further than that because that may not be far enough to solve the problem. So I'm curious if anybody has thoughts about that. On the amortization period, if we believe it's cruel, if we believe this is a moral issue, the only answer is now. Now, people can disagree about whether or not it's a moral issue. People can disagree about whether this is a societal evil that the advocates of these ordinances say that it is. But if we believe it is, there's not an and solution here. Either it's wrong or it isn't. So I would, now for practical reasons, 4 months, 6 months, something like that. I mean, that's not a huge thing to me, whether it's, but basically definitely before the end of the year, definitely before 6 months, if we decide it's a moral issue we need to go forward on.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. I'll just touch on some of the subjects my colleagues have touched on. The fine issue is one. I think generally most of our fines are probably too low to encourage the behavior we really wish. They ought to be meaningful if we're going to have them at all. So I certainly defer to our staff's thoughts on what maybe, we could max that out at, but I think if you're going to say you want a behavior to cease in the village, and you're going to fine for engaging in that behavior, it needs to be something that isn't just something you can roll into a business model. It needs to be painful. As far as the amortization period, what do we want? We want it now. Yeah. We also still are trying to manage the village a little bit, so something that we all sort of agreed on was an orderly and logical path. One thing that I have a question about is what happens to the animals that are there now. There's a building full of animals, so what's the plan going to be? I'd like to understand, if we figure out that we're going to do this, what that transition really looks like. And then, do we have any other sort of precedents that really ends, I'm looking at you, that you could point back to, related to others' uses in zonings that have been, where we decided we wanted to abolish that use in the village? It wouldn't have to be just uses, but I'm focused there, of course, but then also zoning things, where we had existing situations that we tried to put immediate changes on rather than sort of, changes that happen over time as a result of businesses ceasing. There's a big difference there. If there was anything in our past, I'd like to know about it, just to see how that went.
Of course, the sign ordinance was a 7-year amortization period, ultimately went to 10 years.
Yeah.
We're not talking about signs.
Yeah, right. That one I knew about, obviously, and I don't think anybody's talking about along that kind of time period here. And then the last thing is this definition issue. I'd like to hear everybody in the audience talk more about that, as well as my colleagues. The sale at all, if the goal here is to do our part to diminish a market for the potential of sale for puppy mill bred dogs, I think that's the goal, then I guess I'm thinking that any sale makes the most sense, because I don't want to burden us with trying to manage it. At the same time, if there was a model out there that helped alleviate the actual volume of those dogs that were in existence, then there'd be an upside to that too. And so I don't have an opinion formed on that. I'd like to hear more about it. So I guess that's my 2 cents, Mayor. Or 6 cents, whatever it was.
Okay. Any specific comments regarding the amortization period?
It needs to be orderly. It needs to be orderly and thought through, and something that both the village can manage, as well as the existing business can manage, and some thoughts about the facility itself, as well as the existing pets that are there. I want to understand what that looks like. To put it in extreme, if we said tomorrow you have a building full of animals that didn't have a home. Obviously, that's not the intention, but some understanding of what that looks like I need before I can answer that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wallace, good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. Obviously, this is an extremely emotionally charged issue. We've received communications from residents that say that they're in favor of this ordinance. We've received communications from non-residents who say they're in favor of this ordinance, and we've received communications from people that, non-residents and residents that are not in favor of this ordinance. So sifting through those emails, looking at the research, in my opinion, if we are here to represent the residents, which I believe we are, then in my opinion, it is our duty to pass this ordinance. So I will be voting in favor of the ordinance on March 5th. I am in favor of a shorter amortization period, 60 days, 90 days. I would say no more than 6 months is currently where I'm at. And to Commissioner White's comment regarding Humane Society, I'd be open to looking at our language mimicking that, if that is what everyone feels would be best. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for addressing all the points with clarity.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Obviously, I think everyone out in the audience can see where things are going. So I only say that because when we get to public comment, just take into account what you've already heard and where things are going. There's an old saying that trial lawyers are told, when you're winning, you don't need to say anything. Not trying to discourage anyone from their comments, and some of my colleagues have actually invited comments, but obviously folks are free to speak their minds. And we do have some things that we're still going to be working on, but I think if you're reading the room, you probably know where things are going. One thing I do want to add is that, and this isn't an attempt to anyone to pat themselves on the back, but let's be clear, 6 months ago, this wasn't even on our radar screen. Do you know how rare it is to have a piece of legislation like this go from where it was, which was nowhere, to a date where it's going to be voted on in 6 months? That's extremely unusual. So I understand the urgency and the comments that have been made about the urgency, but this wasn't even on the radar screen of this village 6 months ago. And I want everyone to remember that. So it moved pretty quickly, very, very quickly. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that from the urgency sense, is that this wasn't urgent 6 months ago. A year ago, nobody was talking about it. 2 years ago, didn't even know what it was. So this is lightning fast, just to put it in perspective. It's also a pretty comprehensive ordinance. It's mimicking California, which is hardly known for being a very restrictive conservative state when it comes to a lot of its ordinances. It usually is the first in a lot of things, whether it's privacy or the environment or protecting animals or protecting people. So it's a pretty comprehensive, detailed ordinance. And I haven't heard anybody say they have a problem with the ordinance other than, I think Commissioner Barnett and others raise a good point about enforceability. Because what we don't want to do is pass an ordinance that we can't enforce. Because that's going to make everybody in this room very unhappy. Because what we'll have is an ordinance that can't be enforced and an issue that remains notwithstanding all the work that was put in to generate it. So I am interested in whether there's a more pragmatic, practical way of enforcement. Clearly, we're passing an ordinance. That barrel has gone over the waterfall. But whether from a pragmatic enforceability standpoint, there's just an easier way to do it. Because we do have to be mindful of the unintended consequences of any ordinance that we consider and pass, including the costs to enforcement, which ultimately is a cost to residents. So that's something I would be happy to hear more about. In terms of the fines, I don't feel strongly one way or the other. Fines could be increased as far as I'm concerned, between $75 and $750. If it were $1,000, $2,000, to me that's six of this, half dozen of the other. We do try to, I'll pick up on Commissioner Barnett's comment, we do try to do things in an orderly fashion whenever we change the rules on anything. And obviously we're not talking about signs here, but whenever we talk about anything where we're changing the way things happen in our village, we try to do it in a way that achieves some kind of balance and some kind of order. I think that's a good way to describe it. And so the concept of the amortization period is not something that should be viewed as, oh my goodness, why is that in there? It's designed to try to achieve some balance and some kind of order to address a transition. But let's remember that if this ordinance passes, there will be no more pet sale stores in the village other than those that comply with this ordinance. So that's it. And the only one that exists won't be around for very long, at least in its current manifestation. So the ordinance itself achieves a great deal. So I do want to take a little bit of issue with some comments that were mentioned. For those that have been advocating for this, this is a tremendous amount of accomplishment, even if you don't get everything that you perhaps wish for in terms of amortization or timing or whatnot. And I even mentioned, I think, once upon a time, there was a gentleman from the, I believe it was a gentleman, excuse me, from the Humane Society of the United States. And we were talking about this issue, and I mentioned that the Humane Society of the United States has a publication called Guide to Using Local Ordinances to Combat Puppy Mills. And on page 4 of that document, which I view to be the guide for how you can accomplish change within your community, it talks about the need to recognize the possibility of compromise. And whether you call it compromise, you call it order, you call it transition, I think some element of that is appropriate, and I just think that's a pragmatic, practical reality. It's not a question of morality. It's a lot of things that we do are not light switches. You can't turn them off, on and off like that. It doesn't work that way. It may seem that way, but there's usually a lot that goes on behind the scenes that one must understand. So I am not insensitive to the concept of orderly transition and how long that takes to be fair and balanced, and ultimately, let's keep in mind, achieves the goal that a lot of folks have advocated for, both within our community and outside of our community, very passionately, and are on the cusp of achieving in a breakneck time frame. I won't even tell you about some of the other things that we've tried to tackle that have taken years. This is less than 6 months. They want to talk about making change. This is about as close to a light switch as you can get. And I just want to be sensitive to that because we do need to be orderly in how we transition. And so I think there does need to be some flexibility. What that is, obviously my colleagues have expressed their views on it. It's probably going to be shorter than what's being proposed right now. But I do think that there is some pragmatic, practical, realistic need for that, regardless of what we might feel from an emotional standpoint. But clearly, I think we all see where things are going. Any other questions from the any other questions or comments from the council or questions of staff before I open it up for input from the audience? All right, well, we'll have an opportunity once we hear from those in the audience. So with that, if there are any questions or comments from members of the audience, we'd welcome hearing from you. Boy, did I scare everyone away? I like it when people actually take my advice. Good evening, welcome.
No, well, my name is
Some
Mark
things
Tolman.
never change, Mr. Tolman.
My name is Mark Tolman. I live at 1109 61st Street, and I come to you tonight as a resident of Downers Grove and also as the Downers Grove Township Supervisor and also as the, I have been adopted by my adopted cat, Libby, to come here and talk on her behalf also. I looked at the documents prepared by staff. You guys have short-circuited most of my comments, and I'm very pleased that that happened. The documents prepared by staff, I'm pleased to see the village has correctly identified the main problems current with commercially bred pets. I'm pleased to see the changes proposed and the discussion about the time frame and about the fines. And I hope to see these changes made as soon as possible, March 5th. Past that, this topic, I'd like to stress that banning sales from, I call them breeding prisons, because that's really what they are. They're not puppy mills, they're breeding prisons. It isn't about being anti-business, and I want to calm everybody on that issue. This is about anti-cruelty to the animals that are parts of our family. So, again, I thank you as a resident, as the supervisor of Downers Grove Township, and as the owner of an adopted cat. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Tully and council members. My name is Carolyn Mossberger. I'm the director at the West Suburban Humane Society, and we are proud to be members of the Downers Grove community for over 32 years. So I'm going to make this really quick. But when people say that they have a right to choose to buy at a pet store, it is eventually the community and animal shelters that have to support so many of these choices. When puppies are purchased at pet stores, shelters have to step up by euthanizing dogs when they become unwanted. One reason they become unwanted is behavior problems arise by poor breeding or socialization. The cost of sheltering and euthanizing these animals is passed on to the public by tax dollars that are necessary to support animal control. According to the Humane Society of the United States, it is estimated that 2 million puppies are born in puppy mills each year, and at the same time, it is estimated that between 2 and 3 million dogs and cats are euthanized in shelters each year. The longer the pet store stays in business, the more that dogs die in shelters, and breeding females in puppy mills suffer and continue to live in deplorable conditions. And again, who pays for these puppies? It's the taxpayer. The Humane Society of the United States also estimates that the cost for running animal care programs in the United States is between $4 and $7 per capita. So if we apply these figures to the village of Downers Grove, it costs the taxpayers between $198,000 and $347,000 a year to support animal control. That doesn't even include shelters like us. We don't receive any government funding, any taxpayer dollars, so that doesn't even include what we spend per year on the animals in our care. But can we as a community reduce the number of unwanted animals? In 2015, the city of Chicago instituted a similar ordinance, and euthanasia rates dropped considerably. So I just want to tell you a little bit about those. In 2015, when the ordinance was instituted, Chicago Animal Care and Control euthanized 2,757 animals. In 2016, that dropped to 1,876 animals. 2017, 689, and in 2018, 601. The ordinance you are considering will decrease the financial burden to the public. More importantly, it will reduce the number of euthanasias that shelters have to face each and every day when there are too many dogs or dogs from commercial breeders that have behavior problems caused by poor breeding or socialization. And finally, West Suburban Humane Society, and I'm sure other shelters in the area would be happy to work with the village to put together a humane business model for Happiness is Pets if that's something that you're interested in. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Mayor?
Thank you. Appreciate your comments and the offer. And Commissioner Waldeck, I believe, had a quick question.
Sure. Well, one of the comments I made, people want to buy pets, and they enjoy going to, something convenient, a store, and we got that old song, how much is that puppy in the window, and it's cute and all that. But we do have this problem that you talk about. Is there a way, we talked about enforcement, is there a way the Humane Society could help us enforce whatever ordinance we pass, preferably, if there was a legitimate breeder or a group of breeders that could be approved, that could, that would have a supply chain that wouldn't be considered a puppy mill, but would be safe. Would the Humane Society be interested in participating in something like that?
I don't know much from the breeder side, but I can tell you that we get, I don't want to exaggerate, but we get in the 10s, 30 emails a day from rescue groups all over Illinois that want our help in placing puppies and dogs that have a very short time that they're able to stay in that animal control before they're euthanized. I mean, we could supply a Happiness is Pet store with puppies all day long that would not be coming from a puppy mill. And we would be happy to share our contacts with them. And again, we would have to talk about what this humane business model looks like and what we could do to help, but we would be happy to assist in any way that we could.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, welcome.
Hi, I'm Rich Cullivaney, 6825 Camden, Mayor, Council, staff. I just wanted to personalize this. I'll keep my comments brief. My wife's mother was ill, and her husband passed away a few years ago, and she was lonely. So my wife and her brother thought it'd be a wonderful idea to get her a puppy. So they paid $800 for a puppy. They ended up buying it from a puppy mill. They had no idea at the time it was from a puppy mill. It was a little Yorkie, a cute little dog that my mother-in-law fell in love with. And then this dog started having kidney problems and kidney stones and couldn't pass. This dog needed two $1,500 operations within a matter of months. My mother-in-law's income was $1,450 a month, and she loved that dog. And then the vet finally said, this dog is not going to survive a third operation. So not only do you have a puppy that's coming out of an abhorrent situation with cruelty, but it's a terrible thing to do to people who fall in love with them. And I think now of the puppies that will be brought home for Valentine's Day or Easter or kids' birthdays or any other thing that happens between now and this 4-year period of time. And it's just not a matter of impacting a business. Mary, you asked were there situations where we acted immediately. I believe with Tobacco 21, that went into effect right away. And I'm pretty sure that had a big impact on those businesses who were selling tobacco products, vape products to people who are under 21. And if I'm not mistaken from reading the ordinance, that went in immediately. Regarding possible litigations, people are always threatening to sue. I'm not a lawyer, but I know there are 4 in the room. And occasionally from my business experience, I ask myself the question, well, if I was representing someone, which side would I want to represent? And if I was an attorney, I'd love to get this in front of a jury of our peers and let them decide. And my final point we're trying to make is all we're trying to do is have this business replace their supply chain with something that's not abhorrent or reprehensible. There are other things that have been legal in this country that turned out to be very reprehensible, very legal, until we had the moral courage to stand up to those things. And I think this is a fine example. I would think a few phone calls to places like the Humane Society, to reputable breeders, would give this business an opportunity in a matter of a couple of months to get these animals from humane places, and so that little kids and elderly people. The loss of that dog broke my mother-in-law's heart. She really went downhill after that. and she died about 6 months later. So it's not just the cruelty to the puppies, it's, to the people as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story with us. Other questions or comments from the audience? Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. My name is Brian Munt, and this is my wife, Lorraine, and our foster turned foster failure, Betty Boop. The reason why she's here is she is the living embodiment of those defects you were mentioning before in some of your comments. So let me tell you a little bit about Betty Boop. So originally she was our foster back in 2016, and we fell in love with her. We fostered with the West Suburban Humane Society, and we ended up adopting her, and we've been involved in rescue for 12 years, and we've seen firsthand the horrors of puppy mills, firsthand what horrors puppy mills cause. Betty Boop, when she came to us, was an 8-year-old puppy mill breeder release who most likely stopped having large litters, therefore she wasn't profitable to the breeders anymore. Betty Boop was completely unsocialized and had no idea how to live in a regular home. She would spend much of her time spinning in circles, which is indicative of puppy mill dogs, as they do. That's all they can do inside their confined cages. And to this day, she still spins when she's stressed out. You wouldn't know it here, but she is actually very stressed out. Her ears have been cropped and her tail has been docked, which serves no purpose in today's world, other than it was most likely done to prevent the inevitable bites and possible infections from being a breeding dog. Betty Boop had no idea how to use a staircase in her home, and she needed to be carried up and down the stairs until she eventually learned them. Even today, 3 years later, living in our home, she's still terrified of strangers and takes a significant amount of time to warm up to friends. She still has house training issues, and as she has spent the first 8 years of her life going in a cage without being properly trained. Now, Betty Boop is just one of 2 foster mill failures in our family. Our second, who's not with us here tonight, his name is Newman, who was just 11 months old when he was released by a puppy mill based in Arkansas. All we knew about Newman was that he was an extremely matted, quote-unquote, extra Shih Tzu that they were not going to breed, and therefore they released him to the rescue that we were part of. We couldn't even tell what kind of dog Newman was, because in his picture he was so overgrown and matted that you couldn't tell what kind of dog he was. Like Betty Boop, Newman was completely unsocialized and terrified to turn his back on us for the first 2 weeks living in our home. Newman has bowed front legs and splayed paws from living the first 11 months of his life in a wired floor cage that was too small for him. Newman is now 12 years old, but he still displays behaviors at times that is likely linked to his first year in a puppy mill. Beyond all of this, both of them are the most loving animals, and we treat them as our kids. Had it not been for organizations like the West Suburban Humane Society actively rescuing animals from cruel and horrible conditions of puppy mills, these animals may have been killed by the breeders after they reached the end of their profitability. Now, I was going to go into some details about why happiness as pets is bad, but it seems like I understand, it's consensus along the council members that you understand that and why we should reduce that harmonization period. So, the proposed ordinance of the ban of the sales of dogs and cats and rabbits with Downers Grove is in a step in the right direction, but I urge you to pass it with reduced atomization period. Let me see here. Sorry about that. So by passing the ordinance without language allowing Happiness as Pets to continue their business model for the next 3 years, will save countless lives of the breeding animals. Betty Boop is a sign of that. That have to live in the horrendous conditions perpetrated by those of whom Happiness as Pets does business with. It will also steer potential Downers Grove residents who are looking for a dog or cat to add to their family to the West Suburban Humane Society, who has been a longtime resident of the village and whose sole mission is to find permanent homes for dogs and cats, not for profit. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Mary Edwards. I did have a PowerPoint, but I don't have to use it tonight, it looks like. But I do want to go over a few things. I think it's wonderful that you do want to work with rescue groups, hopefully, especially West Suburban Humane Society. What I did was I went into some of the Happiness is Pets and observed things, and then I looked at the Ohio state laws that are touted to be one of the best laws on the books, which I totally disagree with. They're the bare minimum of what dogs need in stores. So what I did was I looked at the Ohio laws, and I'm going to go over them really quickly and then compare them to what was going on at Happiness is Pets. I visited a couple Happiness is Pets. According to the Ohio law, the flooring surface is of a material that is not solid. It has to have a resting area where the puppies can lay, and it cannot be made of wire. If it is made of wire, it cannot be made of wire, and it cannot be coated. When I went down to Happiness is Pets, each and every cage had grid patterns which are wired. In fact, the Humane Society of the United States says these are designed to allow feces to pass through. It is not the standard flooring used in best practice animal hospitals and animal shelters. It is easier to clean and sanitize than cleaning caked-on feces both on the floor and the dog. Solid flooring is also more comfortable for canines, allowing them to play, jump, and move around more naturally. Ohio law will provide that you have to provide the dog an opportunity for daily exercise of at least 30 minutes. I had conversations with the staff at Happiness is Pets, and it varied from half an hour to an hour a day. 23 hours in a cage is not appropriate for a puppy. This is the time where they should be learning socialization. They should be exercised. In fact, we inherited a dog from Happiness is Pets, a boxer. His name was Julian. He came in to us. He had been adopted 4 days before from Happiness is Pets. His legs were twisted, and he had a hard time walking. We sent him to the vet, and he was seen by a vet to evaluate his back legs. They appeared to be weak and underdeveloped. X-rays were taken to make sure everything was okay, and the doctor felt that it was because he was caged so long and from nutrition. He was actually sent to an orthopedic surgeon, and he was given exercises to do, hopefully, and he was adopted. He actually started walking better, but it was due to being confined for so long. You need to provide the dog an opportunity to safely access the outdoors during daylight hours. Happiness is Pets has no outdoor areas to exercise their dogs. They have to provide daily environmental enrichment. When I observed the dogs, they each had a plastic toy. Most of them laid there passively or scratched at the glass trying to get attention. No owner, this is again from Ohio, no owner, manager, or employee of a pet store that negligently sells, delivers, barters, auctions, or gives away a dog that is 8 weeks old, it's illegal. In fact, it's an Illinois law that no dog dealer, kennel operator, cattery operator shall separate a puppy or kitten from its mother for the purpose of sale until such puppy or kitten has obtained the age of 8 weeks. When I was at Happiness is Pets, there was a puppy there that was 7 weeks old. Breeders can no longer house dogs in isolation. Not really sure what isolation means, but as I observed at Happiness is Pets, almost every dog there was in a kennel by itself. Again, this is a time to socialize animals. 80% of their brain is growing at this time. This is the time that they learn all kinds of social skills, and if they miss that opportunity, the research shows it's hard to change that behavior. I'm glad that you're looking at a shorter period. I think this is just really unacceptable for these animals to live this way. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Edwards, and don't forget your flash drive. Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Hello again. I was here for the very first meeting. I thank you for your time. My name is Vanessa Nelson. I came the first time to represent Warrenville and the swiftness that they were able to pass their ordinance. And I really am grateful that you guys are pretty much moving ahead. It sounds like you've got most of the facts and things like that. Just a few little nudges to kind of help you along, and I actually wanted to answer or kind of address some of the questions too that you had during your earlier period where we were all commenting, but I wanted to make one little quick point before then of what I was going to talk about today. It has less to do with cruelty and more to do with public health concerns. I'm a veterinary technician and have been in the field for almost 15 years, 10 of which was spent in clinics, and the last 2 years has been at West Suburban Humane Society. I can vouch for the countless hours veterinarian offices take helping educate their clients, especially when it comes to bringing a new puppy when they bring home a new puppy, and the importance of proper deworming regimens and sanitation at the home, keeping them and their families protected. I myself was exposed to Campylobacter and became very ill 3 years ago. I'm going to read just a short blurb from the Humane Society of the United States, which I think is an excellent source. They have done a lot of research on this topic, and if you're looking for other ways to help implement different things into your ordinance, I think this is a great resource. But they had a little question and answer here of why would a local government take away the public's right to buy a puppy from a place they want? Local, state, and government can legislate for the health and safety of their community and have a duty to protect their constituents. Commercially bred dogs often live in horrendous conditions and suffer from an array of illnesses, often unknown by the consumer at the time of purchase. Some of the illnesses, such as parasites and infections, will travel into local communities and infect otherwise healthy pets, while others can be transmitted to humans. In October 2017, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention alerted the public to a multi-state outbreak of an antibiotic-resistant strain of Campylobacter bacteria that infected dozens of people, sending some to the hospital that was linked to the contact with pet store puppies. Beyond the health issues, pet stores often mislead consumers about the source of the puppies and utilize predatory lending schemes. To ensure customer protection and animal welfare, localities can pass laws restricting pet sales. So that was kind of one of their general statements, and again, kind of on my little personal story, I received a call from DuPage County Public Health to investigate where I might have come in contact with this bacterium since I did go see my doctor. It was determined after many questions that I was most likely exposed at work by a puppy that we had seen for an examination that was not doing well. While I am lucky to have a strong immune system, I was able to fight off this bacteria on my own, but not everybody is so lucky. For instance, young children or anyone with a compromised immune system. This could cause hospitalization, and as the article stated, we are also entering a state of crisis, as the article mentioned, that the multi-state outbreak was an antibiotic-resistant strain of Campylobacter. This is a larger issue than anyone realizes. Those of us in the veterinary and human healthcare fields would agree we have only so many antibiotics, and they are starting not to work due to overuse, and also because of resistance. Many of the commercially bred animals are often treated with antibiotics that it can be purchased freely online and from other sources without a prescription. Many of these are used as prophylactic treatments, even though they are not needed due to the living conditions that they are in. Many of them are used on off-label in pregnant females and puppies that are too young, which can cause other health issues in the animals. Again, in the veterinary community and at the shelter, we pride ourselves in following strict guidelines and regimens given by the manufacturers to help avoid this. Now, I have another personal penny to throw in the pond. I'm an expectant mother, and many of these parasites or bacteria can be extremely harmful to my health, especially considering I would not be able to take many of the treatments because it may harm my unborn child. I present to you the question, who do you think is one of the most common groups of people that want to go buy a puppy? I'll answer it for you. Well, it's families with small children, with pregnant mothers, with visiting grandparents. So we owe it to our entire community to keep them informed and protected. And yes, this is just like the lettuce situation. We don't want to see that the animals are just necessarily considered defective or we can dispose of them. We actually need to address the source and where a lot of these animals are coming from and why they would have these bacteria or parasites in the first place. And lastly, I'd like to mention a brief referral in the article that talked about predatory lending, which is illegal in many states. This is where a pet store could charge up to 100% interest on a payment plan or a loan. And this is not my area of expertise by any means, but as a consumer, it's very concerning. Many people are taken advantage of in this situation and should be protected from these types of loans. Who would say no when you're in the pet store holding a cute little puppy and they go, well, for a low price of whatever, you could take them home today. So as mentioned, I would encourage you to look at no-kill shelters, such as West Suburban, that have required good vet checks and not good credit checks in order to bring home animals. And then real quick, I actually just wanted to comment on a big concern that you guys are talking about that's really tough, and the first gentleman had mentioned of the local governments are basically acting on this first before state and our national federal government is actually acting on these things. So we have a chance to set a precedent and what should be done, and I think it's a very valuable concern, and a person that is a vet tech and has seen so many sides of this. And some of my coworkers may not fully agree with this statement, but something I realized just sitting here listening to you guys, that there is going to be a big backlash. I'd love to give any business an opportunity to change their model or to do something different. And while I think acting very quickly is what needs to be done, I think there's something very important to consider that Burnett mentioned as far as usually there's an order system, meaning that, oh, we want this many puppies and we want them here by this date. So they have pre-orders in with these breeders, and what is going to happen to all of those puppies that are on order for them over the next 3 to 6 months if you require them to change their business model right now. So I don't personally think, this is my personal opinion, that it is unreasonable to say, okay, we give you 6 months to a year so that they can work with humane societies, pick up a new business model, work on the adoption front of things versus the purchasing front, because that's changing a huge part of it, as well as let their breeders know we will no longer be ordering from you, because there is already a standing order of these animals that are going to be coming in. So if we all of a sudden just shut that off, where are all those puppies and moms and dads going to go? So we need to give some time for response from the places that we may not think are great. And my last comment would be that there are a ton of great resources out there, and not everybody agrees with these resources either, but lots of people want that instant gratification, like you're saying. They want to walk into a pet store and go, I want that puppy, and they're walking out the door with it, and they may want a certain breed. We've been breeding dogs for hundreds of years. This is not something new, but using stuff like the AKC or the American Kennel Club, they have lists of approved breeders and what they see as a standard of care on their websites, and that's where I'm encouraging local governments to react, and I think it's a great idea to build some of that into these ordinances, because that's not an issue that's just going to go away overnight, and a lot of these federal governments and state governments are going to need to look at, well, how do we build a list that's okay? And a lot of people are basically recommending some type of certification for breeders that they can get for their local governments, that they can get from the federal government. And one big positive of that is not only do we eliminate the type of breeders that we don't want, but we also create jobs with that within our own governments. Because yes, you need to hire somebody that could probably go look at this and keep after it. And it's not just a dog, cat, rabbit issue. It's an issue with our cows. It's an issue with our livestock. It's an issue across the board. So it's not something new that the government's thinking, oh, this just came out of nowhere. And I don't know if people know much about it, but there's been a lot of information circling the internet as far as the government shutdown there was a lot of government veterinarians that were affected by that, and they were still going to work unpaid, risking not getting workman's comp if something happened to them, because somebody's got to take care of the animals, and most of it's large animal related. So it is already in place. There's lots of resources that I don't necessarily know about as far as that side, but I would really encourage building something in there. And I do think fast action is necessary just because of the public health concerns. I myself have personally been affected by it. But I really thank you for your time, and I thank you for pushing this issue forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to try to resist, though, adding to the largest employer in the state of Illinois, which is government.
Hi, my name is Dr. Barb
Good
Hannon.
evening, welcome.
I'm the veterinarian administrator for
You guys are going
DuPage
to talk
County.
Commissioner Waldeck and it changes his mind.
Well, you know, you really spoke great wisdom. I mean, I was really impressed with everybody's compassionate comments. You obviously really listened, and it took a lot of time, I'm sure, to go through all that material, and you get it. And I don't feel like I need to stand up here and convince you, you guys get it. So I just really wanted to thank you for listening so clearly. There is a quote that I really like. It's by Coretta Scott King, who's the wife of Martin Luther King Jr., and it says, "The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members." So the community applauds you as far as for your greatness. I mean, you really have, it's incredibly impressive. Second thing I wanted to mention is that I don't agree that happiness is pets is a bad, you know, like earlier today it said happiness is pets is bad. I don't necessarily agree with that. As far as we want them to succeed just like any business. We want them to sell quality pet foods and leashes and maybe even costumes for Halloween or something like that. The main thing that we're looking at is the source of the animal, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. We want the business to succeed and even stay in Downers Grove. We're just looking at the source of the animals. That there's an alternative, and we provided that alternative, and that's when we say rescues and shelters and things like that. It's, you know, I kind of compare it to if, say, I buy my clothes at, I don't know, say, pick a store, Macy's, Nordstrom, whatever, you know, and maybe there's a clothing line that they use that maybe they provide, maybe it's produced overseas, and it's child labor that produces it, right? Well, then we're not going to say, let's close down Nordstrom, let's close down Macy's. We're just like, change the source where you get these clothes, you know. So it's really as simple as that. It's, and then just like children, animals don't have a voice. And that's why you're seeing such a turnout as far as emails and people, you know, at these meetings and stuff, and why we're so compassionate is because we feel that they don't have a voice and we have to be a voice for them. The last thing that I'll mention is the verbiage. You know, you kind of talk about how you want to kind of write the language and finalize it and such. And I would suggest that maybe you reach out to Mark Ayers, who's the representative from Illinois for the United States Humane Society, HSUS, and I think he can really help make it comprehensive. The reason being is in Chicago they passed a similar ordinance, and what we were finding is that rescues, you know, under the facade of a rescue, animals were showing up in pet stores as a rescue animal, but it was a purebred $1,000 husky. Okay, well, so sometimes there's loopholes that you can get around as far as because there is a financial incentive for this. So that's what I throw out there is that maybe when formulating the language that you reach out to somebody who's very experienced throughout the United States. And Mark Ayers was here at the last meeting, and I think he answered a lot of your questions and is very well-versed in this area. So thank you again, and like I said, the community applauds your greatness. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate your comments, and that just goes to underscore that in any language definitions, that simplicity is going to be key, because if it becomes complicated in enforcement, we're just setting it up for failure. So that would argue for perhaps not the most precise language, but the simplest to enforce language, which may be something we'll think about. I think Commissioner Waldeck's flipped his vote.
Pardon?
Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Jennifer Ballman. I'm the current board president of the West Suburban Humane Society and a longtime volunteer. I'm not going to go into everything that I had prepared based on what you've discussed tonight, but I do want to make a couple important points. At the last council meeting, there was a comment made that the proposed ordinance to restrict the sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits, that the breeders who supplied these pet shops met the criteria listed by the ASPCA. So upon fact check, it was discovered that the ASPCA posts on their website a position statement on criteria for responsible breeding. Won't go through all of it, but I would say the big bullet point here is never sells puppies to a dealer or a pet shop. In addition, if you visit the American Kennel Club website, their position is that with 125 years of experience on welfare of dogs, dog ownership, care, and well-being, they are experts on purebred dogs. From this site, you can access resources for links to humane and responsible breeders. Upon visiting these sites, it's clearly stated that they never sell puppies to pet stores. Breeds include, which I don't know if I can kill the tree here, but I have all of their code of ethics statements from the following breeds that say that they will never sell to pet stores. It includes Bichon Frise, Beagle, Boston Terrier, Boxer, Dachshund, French Bulldog, German Shepherd, Golden Retriever, Miniature Schnauzer, Pomeranian, Shih Tzu, Siberian Husky, Soft-Coated Wheaten Terrier, and many, many others. However, all of the purebred dogs that I just mentioned are currently for sale at the pet store in Downers Grove, and all of their breed clubs prohibit breeders from supplying them product. The AKC does not consider dogs a commodity in which to be sold to an unknowing consumer. Pet stores exist to make money on the backs of dogs and the consumer's wallet. Do we really want to encourage this type of salesmanship in Downers Grove? Buyer beware. As a representative from the shelter whose primary product is mixed breed dogs, we're not dismissing the desire from some to purchase purebred dogs. We understand that some dog fanciers like and want purebreds, and we do not want to restrict that right, but instead support free choice by referring interested parties to reputable humane breeders as recognized by prominent leaders in this area, which is HSUS, ASPCA, and AKC. We respectfully encourage the village to move forward by adopting and enforcing this necessary ordinance and without an amortization period. Important to remember that HSUS states there are over 167,000 breeding dogs in the U.S. that produce an estimated 2 million puppies per year. Times that by 4 years, or 3.5. So let's start now. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Backman. I'm an attorney practicing in the area of animal law and advocacy. You've all received my 7,000 emails and attachments, so I'm going to keep my comments really brief.
7,237.
Thank you. So believe it or not, you know, for those of you who know me, I'm actually going to keep it brief. 2 points, really. It's true. The first is with regard to the definition of a humane society. I will not read the statute because I've already emailed it to you twice. So our recommendation as the congressional leader for the Humane Society would just be to refer back to the Illinois statute, which is 510 ILCS 70/2.05.1. I'm already done. See? Point 2. With respect to the time frame when the the ordinance would take effect, I actually pulled a non-humane society statistic, believe it or not. I pulled a statistic from the American Pet Products Association, and they say that there is a $70 billion a year industry. Less than 2% of that is from the sale of commercially raised puppies. So our position would be that if Happiness is Pets and any other pet store in the future can't find profit in 98% of $70 billion, then they're doing something wrong. It has nothing to do with where their animals are sourced. There's a lot of money to be made using a different business model. And so we would encourage you to adopt the ordinance sooner than later. And that's it. That's all I have. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing that with us. As well as the emails. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Peggy Grandel from Joliet. I just wanted to come up here and say thank you. Thank you for your serious consideration of this matter. And just something I did want to mention, though, there's concern about what's going to happen to the puppies that are currently in the store. Obviously something that people would be concerned about. I'm certainly not in the management of their business, but if you are winding down your business and you have a drop-dead date when you have to either close, relocate, change your model, whatever it is, you stop ordering. I'm not sure about the purchase orders, how far out they go for puppies, but not every community is as progressive as Downers Grove. There are still pet stores opening up selling puppies. Those puppy breeders that are in the commercial breeding industry will have no problem moving those puppies somewhere else. And also, Happiness is Pets has 4 other stores. You close one store, why couldn't you, if you have any remaining inventory, why couldn't you just move it to another store? But that's just my observation. Thank you for the time. I had my top 10 reasons to pass a humane ordinance. I was kind of excited about that. But I don't need to because you guys already get it. I just like to say what the number one reason is, in my opinion. The number one reason to pass this proposed ordinance is because it's the right thing to do. For the breeding dogs left behind in the mills, for the very young puppies loaded onto transport trucks or tucked in the back of vans driven by the business owners, the families whose hearts are broken when they have a sick animal, or conversely, when they realize they can't afford the payments for the puppy or the care. And lastly, for the 2,200 adoptable purebred and mixed breed dogs, according to PetFinder.com today, within 25 miles of Downers Grove, which includes 624 puppies. So thank you. I almost wish I lived in this town. Thank you so much.
I believe there are some homes for sale. We can hook you up. I think I know one.
With large yards.
Thank you for your comments. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Commissioners. As you know, my name is Laura Crawford, and I represent Chamber 630, which are your corporate residents. And, you know, there's been a lot of personalization up here that you've heard, and a common denominator that I keep hearing is breeders, and everyone who talked about it is absolutely right. The breeders will be continuing to supply to pet stores, and I believe that if you truly, truly do care about the animals, that it'll be the breeders that you will legislate. And I'll give you a couple examples. I told you at the last time that I was at the dais, I have a rescue dog. It's a Tibetan Terrier. It was born in a rescue place in Plainfield that's attached to a veterinarian's office. That dog lived in a cage for 5 years, and it was unrecognizable. I mean, if you saw it now versus when I got it 4 years ago, it would be night and day difference. It had barely any fur. It had a chopped off ear. It had cuts on his nose and in his eyes. It was a disaster. But it was at a very reputable rescue place. Now, don't get me wrong. I will always appreciate everything that our humane societies do. But I want to share that personal story. Another one is 22 years ago, I came to Downers Grove. I think it might have been for the very first time, by the way. And I was going there to buy a German Shepherd from a very reputable breeder. He guaranteed that the dog would not get hip dysplasia or he would bring it back. Take it back, excuse me. And, you know, you fall in love with dogs. 5 years later, of course, 5 years, the dog had hip dysplasia, and I've had German Shepherds all my life. With no problem. Picked them up at farms, were given them, you know, a variety of ways to obtain animals. And this breeder, right in Downers Grove, still in business, gave me a dog that had hip dysplasia after 5 years. And did I return it? Of course I didn't return it because I love the dog. I spent $7,000 getting the hips fixed. So that's my little personal note that I'd like to share. And again, I'm going to reiterate that going after the breeders is the answer for Chamber 630, not for a business that's been here for 21 years. And by the way, the Chamber does collect for the last 13 years complaints. It's a U.S. Chamber recommendation. So we do collect complaints, and we get plenty of complaints on businesses in Downers Grove. And we are not a legal entity, so we serve only as a communicator, hoping that amends is created between the consumer and the business. I have never once received a complaint from Happiness is Pets. Just a note that you should, I don't think it's all bad, and I appreciate the previous speaker who agreed with that. Again, I'm going to reiterate that this business has been here in Downers Grove for 21 years. I would recommend that you do take time. I appreciate 6 months. I'm impressed. Anything in Downers Grove got done in 6 months, and here you are ready March 5th to sign an ordinance. But, and I know at the last meeting, with chagrin, it was laughed at that Naperville took a year to do nothing. Well, they did do something. They did not change the law because they took the time to educate themselves. They took a lot of time. They had conference calls with USDA, and I appreciate Commissioner Wallace accepting the invitation to participate in that conference call. I didn't hear from anyone else. Obviously, minds were made up, but I just want to again reiterate that Chamber 630 wants to thank the staff for their exceptional municipal services in writing this ordinance. As you all know, that this business is highly regulated under the Public Act 100-322 that just passed 18 months ago. It had no opposition, legislative opposition. Proponents included Illinois Pet Lovers Association, Illinois State Veterinarian Medical Association, Illinois Animal Control Association, Illinois Retail Merchants Association, Pet Industry Joint Advisory Council, American Kennel Club, and the Federation of Dog Clubs and Owners. The most vocal opponent, as we know, was Safe Pets for Joliet, but there was no opposition from any organization in the village of Downers Grove on record for when this passed, just 18 months ago. And here we are, a year later, you're hearing about it, and 6 months later, you're ready to pass legislation. This business offers a 4-year guarantee on their puppies. They meet or exceed the proposed standards of the Humane Society U.S., as well as the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals standards for breeders. If puppies are raised in a humane condition, which we all want for all puppies, the business cannot be defined as a puppy mill. And then lastly, again, I appreciate the staff of the Village of Downers Grove very, very much. And again, just only 6 months ago, when you first started hearing about this business was granted an occupancy permit that fully stated its business activities. And I find it, as the president and CEO of a Chamber of Commerce, absolutely astounding that in such a short time, the business would be shut down to all of a sudden illegal activities. The business community of Downers Grove is very accustomed to exceptional municipal services. And I hope that if you expect the same, you will vote on a reasonable amortization, preferably to December 31st, 2022 in this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Appreciate you sharing that with us.
Hi.
Good evening. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Karen Smith, and I was really trying very hard to be quiet and
I
not
appreciate
say
that.
anything. But I do live in Naperville. I had a lovely conversation with Ms. Crawford last week, but I'm sorry, I have to correct something. Yeah, well, in Naperville, they didn't decide within a year not to do anything. It has been 5 years, and I know because I was one of the people who started the quest 5 years ago. My daughter was 13 years old when she spoke in front of Naperville City Council. She's now 18 and going to college. So it's been 5 years, and the battle rages on. It is not over. They have not done anything, but it is not over. We're hoping for a new mayor in April, and the tide will turn. I do want to say that humane pet stores are not the wave of the future. They are the wave of right now. Approximately 300 cities, 2 states, and 2 countries have adopted humane pet store laws. Petland Canada is 100% rescue. Anderson Animal Shelter has 2 satellite locations due to partnerships with Pet Supplies Plus and Petco. Businesses stay relevant by staying on top of trends. Your local pet store can ensure their future by catching the wave and going humane. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I appreciate your attempting to exercise restraint, but understood. Thank you. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. As you know, my name is John Burning from Happiness is Pets. Previously, I emailed each of you a copy of the petition for rulemaking drafted by the Humane Society of the United States and the ASPCA. The petition sent to the USDA includes increased standards of care to the USDA Animal Welfare Act. The Humane Society states, quote, "The proposed rules in this petition incorporate many practices already adopted by responsible breeders. Responsible humane breeders are likely already in compliance with all or most of these requirements. I would like to bring to your attention that all of the USDA licensed breeders that Happiness is Pets works with either meet or exceed these proposed standards." Since we're going to use the HSUS for everything, therefore proving by the Humane Society's very own words, our breeders are responsible and humane. If the village is going to rely on the Humane Society to find a puppy mill in the whereas statements of the proposed ordinance, then the village should rely on the Humane Society's own requisites of responsible and humane as well. The ordinance also defines mill bred as dogs being bred and housed in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions without adequate care, food, water, shelter, space, exercise, and socialization. The claim our puppies are mill bred is an extraordinary claim. That claim requires extraordinary evidence. Our average USDA breeder has approximately 20 female dogs, hardly the large-scale commercial breeding facility as described in the ordinance. The claim that responsible breeders never sell to pet stores is merely an opinion, should not be deemed a legal or valid argument. You're going to be told all USDA breeders are puppy mills by individuals who have never even stepped foot inside a USDA licensed kennel before. You're also being told all USDA licensed breeders simply only adhere to the basic minimum standard of care by individuals who have zero proof to substantiate this claim. Again, I invite you to come see our breeders for yourself. If there were puppy mills, as my opponents say, I would be trying to hide them instead of inviting you to see them. Commissioner Waldeck, you mentioned you know there is cruelty in my store. I would like to challenge you to provide actual proof of that and not hearsay. Commissioner Earl, to address your statement of defective animals, approximately 1.5% of our animals actually have a life-threatening congenital defect. Also, you were factually incorrect with your slanderous statement that we euthanize dogs that don't get sold, and you will be challenged to provide evidence of that claim as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening.
Excuse me.
Commissioner Earl.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I said that you specifically euthanize dogs, but if that was a mistaken fact, I apologize. I did not mean that you specifically euthanize dogs. My apologies.
Good evening. I'm Maya Damiano, the Outreach Coordinator for the Companion Animal Protection Society. Back on January 8th, I spoke to you about how Happiness is Pets gets their puppies from Amish breeders in Indiana and how these breeders are unregulated by the state. Our undercover investigators of some of the breeders they use was sent to everyone on the board. Included in our evidence were numerous complaints we've received about Happiness is Pets. However, I'd like to share with you a story of a woman who reached out to me about buying not one, but 2 sick dogs from them. Their first dog, who I share the same name, Maya, was a pug. She didn't survive to see her first birthday. It took the owner months for Happiness is Pets to give her any papers regarding where Maya came from. When Maya died, Happiness is Pets gave her 2 options. They would either cover the expenses or she can get another dog, and she chose the latter. Now with her new pug, he could barely see. He requires eye medication that she cannot afford, and he will eventually go blind. This woman is just one of the many people who submit their complaints to us. We've been getting stories like this over 10 years, and we're sick and tired of the deceit and the fraud that perpetuates from Happiness is Pets. So long as they're allowed to sell sick and dying dogs to the public, we will keep receiving these types of stories unless something is done. We urge that you consider by passing the ordinance, not only will this continue to set the tone for surrounding towns, but it will also create a better community for the residents in Downers Grove, including man's best friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Good evening. Welcome.
Hi.
Hope college is treating you well.
Not there yet. I'm a senior. I wasn't really planning on saying anything, so I'm going to keep it kind of short. But I just wanted to tell you that the first dog I ever really remember having came from a pet store. She was a puppy mill dog. She was a golden retriever. Her name was Opie. And when I was 9 years old, I came downstairs one morning and I found her unable to move her back legs in a pile of her own pee. As a 9-year-old, that's kind of a disturbing thing to see. And I can't tell you how many stories I've heard that are much, much worse about kids much younger than I was getting puppies for birthdays or for Christmas from pet stores who died within months. I at least got years with my dog. I understand that pet stores have policies in which you can return or have a warranty on a dog, but dogs are family, and you wouldn't return a child. No one wants to return a dog either. And what you're hearing from pet stores, that their dogs are not sick, that their dogs are responsibly sourced, that their dogs are no different from rescue dogs, is just simply untrue. And I don't like to hear things that are untrue. I've seen other dogs from these local pet stores as well, not just my own dog. And I would just like you to consider what families go through and what little kids go through with these super, super sick, unethically sourced pets. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Good evening, Mr. Krajewski. How are you?
I'm good, Mayor and Council. Brian Krajewski, 6455 Nash in Downers Grove. Also sit on the DuPage County Board, and I chair our DuPage Animal Services Committee. I want to applaud you for taking this issue up 6 months ago. And just a couple things. I testified about a year ago at another municipality in DuPage County, and I said it's not a matter of if a humane ordinance is going to pass, it's a matter of when. This is going on throughout the country. You referenced California today. I know Maryland has banned it. Here in DuPage, with all due respect to our chamber executive director, who only gave you half the story regarding what happened 18 months ago and no opposition. I'll give you the full story. You maybe already know it because when we were back here in October, we sent you a packet from the county of 450 pages in that packet. But a little history here in Illinois, Chicago banned the sale of humane ordinance, and so did Cook County. The puppy mill lobbyists and the industry was not happy with that. They took a two-pronged approach. They went to court, filed lawsuits, and you've heard about being sued here. There's 6 federal court cases that have upheld the ordinances, 2 in the 7th Circuit, which I know I've emailed at least one of the commissioners, and I think that your village attorney has found those 2 7th Circuit cases, so you have some precedent out there. They also went to Springfield and introduced legislation to ultimately preempt the Home Rule Authority of Chicago and Cook. It was to overturn what they did and to put a watered-down bill in Springfield. And that's the bill that had plenty of opposition. We in DuPage are not home rule. We could not do that. However, we approved 18-0 in opposition to that bill. And that unleashed our lobbyists to work on behalf of DuPage and the residents, and they went down to Springfield. In that packet that we sent to you in October, you'll see a headline from the Chicago Tribune on a Sunday, front page, and it talked about what legislator would support this. It was a disguised legislation to overturn the ban in Chicago and Cook County. I contacted several senators and state representatives representing DuPage County, including another senator, Jill Tracy, down in Quincy, Illinois, who had co-sponsored the bill. We sent her that packet. The next day, she responded back to me that she pulled her name off. Then, after negotiations, Senator Hastings, who was through his committee, they pulled off the preemption to allow municipalities to continue to put in humane ordinances. So with that, they had their watered-down bill, which basically didn't do anything. So the opposition ceased because they did not overturn your authority to be able to put your own humane ordinance in. So that's why 18 months ago that came through with no opposition. It had a lot of opposition until that was pulled out, including us at DuPage County. Then the Seventh Circuit ruled and held that the ordinance was constitutional, or held that it was valid. So there's some precedent there. Then I'm going to touch on point 2 here, your resolution, Senate Bill 2280. Senate Bill 2280 was last session, and we in DuPage County, along with Will County, went to Springfield and tried to get a ban in DuPage and Will County, Senate's Bill 2280. That, of course, the puppy mill lobbyist industry fought that down there, and it did not pass. So that bill is no longer, and appreciate looking for support. On the second point, if you will do a support resolution for this upcoming cycle down in Springfield, because we will be back in Springfield. We're going to have bipartisan support. It's just a matter of how expansive the reach is going to be. The chairman of Lake County has called me up and would like Lake County to join in legislation down in Springfield. Will, May, and DuPage has already approved on our legislative agenda, which is our top 7, 8, 10 priorities, unanimously, bipartisan, to support, again, a ban for DuPage County. And we'll be back in Springfield, and we would like that support resolution number 2 here, but maybe you change it from Senate Bill 2280 to just a support for DuPage County. And the problem, it takes a long time in these states to get it banned, but it starts by communities like yourselves and leadership locally here, right at the ground level. You can see that in Pennsylvania, where Pittsburgh and Philadelphia have already banned it, but now we have bipartisan support with both the Senate and House have bills, bipartisan support, called Victoria's Law, named after a 10-year-old German Shepherd that was overbred at a mill. And hopefully now Pennsylvania will be the 3rd state to ban it. And again, it took Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. There's probably maybe some other communities there. Last week, just to let you know, Mount Vernon banned it. They passed their humane ordinance. Coming up, I know Wheaton has had discussions with various groups of their residents. They have it, I believe, on their agenda a week from Monday to talk about. Mayor Pineda, if you want to give him a call, Mayor Tully, he'll tell you that they're already looking at, they've asked for the model ordinance that was referred to tonight. So again, it sounds like Downers Grove is going to be one of the leading communities that's going to help this effort when it eventually gets passed statewide, because it's coming, it's going to be here. It's not next year, it'll be the following year. But it's happening throughout the country as more and more people get educated and more of the elected officials like yourselves take the time to read and understand it. Clearly, you've done your homework. I would advocate, and I only sent you the state statute once for the Humane Society, but I would refer to that statute in there as far as the definition. And then, fine, again, I think it needs to be increased, $75, they just add to the cost of doing business. $500, per dog, something like that. I think Mayor Tully, you referenced $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, just something that would be a deterrent. I think Commissioner Barnett said the same thing. And then last, the amortization schedule. Some of these states and towns that have banned it have given, a lot less than the 4 years that are in there. 90 days, I think I emailed y'all, 90 days, the transition, 126 months, but some very short time frame, but to allow them to come into compliance. Again, I want to thank you for moving at lightning speed for a government, but again, you took all the time to read everything. And once legislators educate themselves, and we saw that with the county who have sent packets, that's now 400 or 500 pages, to legislators, and once they read everything and understand the whole process on how this industry works, there's only one right answer, and that's to pass the humane ordinance. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Krajewski. Other questions or comments from the audience? I got to tell you, I appreciate everybody's comments and all the continued input that we've received both from our residents, business, and individuals, as well as from beyond the community and a lot of different organizations of different perspectives on this topic. Really appreciate the robust conversation. I got to tell you that listening to it, I almost think this ordinance doesn't go far enough, because I'm starting to get concerned about, I think to your point, Commissioner White, about the enforcement issues. Would it be better just to ban the sale of animals, period? It'd be a lot easier to deal with that. You've actually made me think about whether this doesn't go far enough.
Well, the U.S. Humane Society model ordinance is very very simple.
Well, we got to keep it simple, because if it's not simple, it's going to be ineffective, and all the things we've heard, everybody out there will be unhappy. And one of the things that, well, I'll stop there. And I think Commissioner Earl, no?
Yes, no, that's...
First, and then Commissioner Jose?
Yes, I would be happy to go. I haven't personally told my story of how I've gotten to this point. My first dog, a wonderful dog, came from West Suburban Humane Society, and that was great. Great experience. My second dog came from a USDA breeder, and when I went to pick that dog up, I was horrified and said, okay, I can't do that again. And it just so happened we had gone to Happiness is Pets on a whim, as my daughter wanted to see the puppies in the store. And that is where my third dog came from. And while I have no proof that they actually do put down puppies they don't sell, that is exactly what the salesperson said to me about the dog who my daughter fell in love with. That if you don't buy this dog, they're going to put it down. So may it have been just a sales tactic? Sure. Did it work? You bet it did. That dog lived out its very short life with us and was very ill the whole time we had it. The dog after that, as I have had many, I am a dog lover and I have many of them currently, 3. The next dog, didn't learn my lesson, came from Happiness is Pets as well. That dog wound up almost killing my other 2 dogs and had to be surrendered to a shelter to be rehomed because it couldn't live at my house anymore. After that, I was kind of shell-shocked, and we didn't get another dog for a long time. And we started losing them, and we longed for another dog, and we did find one. We did adopt it. Ultimately, we found out it had come from Happiness is Pets, unfortunately, and it also had a very difficult life. So I've resigned myself to the fact that it has cost me a lot of money, and I have learned my lesson the hard way. I feel bad for anybody who does get into the same situation that I've been in, and I would like to not see it happen again. But I want to make no mistake about it. When I said what I did, I said it because it was from personal experience. I am not maybe always so eloquently spoken on this topic, as it is very emotionally charged for me, and it has been very close to my heart, which is why I brought it forward to begin with when I was approached with it. It's not new. It's been a problem for ages, and I just feel it's time we do something about it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. Like you, hearing the various comments, I also agree that we'd probably want to go all the way and just completely ban the commercial sale. I think there are enforcement issues, and I think we've heard several of them tonight. Very simple comment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate that we have only one business that we're talking about. If we had several, we'd have to address how we affect a number of businesses. Some makes it easier that we have one, but then it puts that particular business up as a target. And it's not something I enjoy hearing. It sometimes seems unfair. I would like to say that I don't like being called a liar or fooled by hearsay. I can say that my source was several years ago by an employee who I know very personally, and before we ever had this topic. So, you know, there was no issue other than I quit there because. So I know who that person is, I trust them. It's apparently very tough to buy a dog. We have Spud, and he's a Pom, and he's a purebred. And he's approved by the American Kennel Society. We've got a little history on the little guy. And being a purebred, if you look up the various breeds, they all have their tendencies, breed tendencies. And Spud displays what is typical of Pomeranians. And I'm sure if you go to another pure breeder, different dogs are subject to various types of situations. And I recognize that. It almost seems like you want to get a non-purebred where these types of problems have been bred out of the breed, and you get a nice happy dog, unless you're interested in pure breeding. Or we've been asked if we wanted to breed Spud, but we won't let the poor guy, to his chagrin. But I don't like to see passing on certain tendencies. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up. The question I have, and staff can probably dig this up certainly before the next one, is the gestation periods of dogs in general. If there's pre-orders, some of these may have already been bred. On their way to entering into a bad situation or entering into the supply chain. And that might be useful as far as the amortization goes. If they've already been claimed by orders, and they will probably be disposed of if the orders aren't fulfilled, then that might have an effect on the amortization situation for me. Because you certainly don't want them disposed of because a particular business can't take them on. So that's all I have. That's the last question I have, and hopefully we'll get this done. And I didn't comment on the fines. I think the fines are a little low, and if we can get some help from the Humane Society or Anti-Cruelty or somebody as far as some sort of enforcement, that would be extremely helpful. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from the council at this point? By the notes that I took some time ago, I think there was pretty clear direction with a few open issues.
Yes, clear direction from the council. Thank you. We are aiming for March 5th consideration and potentially a vote on that night.
Right. And we've obviously got time to address those outstanding issues between now and then. Very good. Thanks again to everyone who commented on this point. Believe it or not, we are not done. We have another item, 7C as in Charlie, which appropriately is about liquor.
Yes.
Yep, I'm happy to present a proposed ordinance creating a Class R3 restaurant liquor license classification. This proposed ordinance comes in response to a PUD amendment that the Village Council approved back in November for the construction of the Cooper's Hawk restaurant here in Downers Grove. This proposed ordinance creates a liquor license that will allow the operations of Cooper's Hawks and allow both for the on-site and off-site consumption of alcohol at that location. If this ordinance is approved, Cooper's Hawk will still be required to attend a public hearing before the Liquor Commission to actually apply for the license once it is in fact created. Happy to answer any questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the council? Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. What prompted our, I'm not sure I understand why we felt like we needed to do this.
We do not currently have a restaurant liquor license that allows both the purchase of a packaged alcohol bottle of wine, basically, for consumption off-site and actual liquor license in a restaurant. We do not have that type of business in Downers Grove.
So help me understand the operational difference between this and like cellar door.
Cellar Door is a wine boutique liquor license. This is not a full restaurant liquor license.
Okay. Okay.
That's the
Processing.
difference. Yep.
Wheels are spinning.
Yep.
And just to add on that, where possible, we've been able to have a different business model fit within perhaps an older ordinance contemplation. We've done that, but sometimes
This one didn't fit because
it
the
just
primary
wouldn't
business.
quite fit, and so we had to do this.
Their primary business is a restaurant, whereas the
Right,
cellar
right.
doors.
And then
That
that-
was the difference.
So I guess the only thing, I'm not going to say I have a problem, that's the wrong choice of words, but I'm a little questioning the whole seating limit issue. The seating limit issue. I need some commentary later on how that helps us and why we think that's important.
And this is also a full liquor license, so not strictly
Right.
limited to beer and wine,
Right.
which is the other difference
Right,
between the
which
cellar door.
Celador doesn't have. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Usually I'm against designer licenses, but this doesn't really seem like to fall in the category of a
I
designer
mean, our time's up. Thanks for coming, everybody. Drive home safely.
Right in the middle of me. No, as I say, I have a problem with designer licenses, but this really doesn't cover anything we have, so I will rely on the deliberations of the Liquor Commission to make sure that this is properly handled. I have no problem approving the license. We'll see how the mechanics and everything work as a result of the Liquor Commission findings. Thanks, Mayor.
Sure, thank you. And again, this is really just the creation of a category. They still have to apply, meet all the criteria to get a license. This isn't giving them a license. This is creating a category for which they can apply. We just didn't have the type of license necessary for this particular manifestation of a business. Any other questions from the council? Questions from the audience? Now you know why we needed a village hall?
Oh, it's a demonstration.
That is our
Any
first.
ceiling tiles you want to have dropped down?
But that fits into, once you're already winning, why would you bother?
Apparently, I was in the minority on that point, so I'm going to go win in Rome. Go with.
And with that,
Who's the
that does
Romans do?
conclude our first reading today.
All right, fair enough. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the first reading. As the manager mentioned, that brings us to the mayor's report. A few items. First of all, I believe we have a coffee with the council, right, on February 16th?
Yes.
Saturday, February 16th, from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. at the Downers Grove Public Library. This is an opportunity for members of the public to engage with, speak to, ask questions of members of the village council and staff on a much more informal basis. So anyone that has any questions or comments of a general nature that would like to share that with the village council, we have our almost every single month coffee with the council, and during the colder months, it is held at the Downers Grove Public Library. So that's this Saturday, February 16th, from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Number two, wanted to just really underscore, point out, and thank the Downers Grove Park District for doing something I think was really, really cool. You may recall that a number of months ago, we mourned the loss of and also celebrated the life of Montrue Dunham, one of our most iconic residents in recent years, as well as a noted historian of our community. So a rare individual who have both documented the history of our community, but was also very much part of the history of our community and making the history of our community, and a quite accomplished individual in her own regard. We had talked about adding, in fact, I believe we did, added Montrue Dunham's name to the list of streets that, we don't create a lot of streets in Downers Grove, but when new streets are created, we have a list of historic names of residents, so that when those streets are created, they are named after, or should be first and foremost named after, a resident. We added Montrue Dunham's name to that list, even though we already have a Dunham Road in Downers Grove, and we don't create a lot of streets because we were founded in 1832. The Park District took up the mantle on this, and on January 17th, the Downers Grove Park District Board of Commissioners passed a resolution to rename the annex at the Downers Grove Museum campus in honor of local historian and author Montrue Dunham. who, as mentioned, passed away in 2017. Couldn't actually think of a better place to do that. They had been talking about doing a park. I think this was a much better idea and far more likely to happen and create less confusion than us naming a street after her. So at any rate, I wanted to share with my colleagues and the rest of the community that the Montreux Jones family was grateful for our support of that. I had the opportunity to speak in favor of it on behalf of the village, and just wanted to thank, on behalf of the community and the village, the Downers Grove Park District for doing something pretty darn cool to honor Montreux Dunham. And I did have one more thing, but then I would be stealing Commissioner Wallace's thunder, so I won't. I would never do that to Commissioner Wallace. So that brings us then to item 9, the manager's report. Mr. Fieldman.
No report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, very good. Item 10, the village attorney's report. Ms. Petrarca.
Hi, Mayor. 2 items to present tonight. The first is an ordinance regarding the sale of cat, dogs, and rabbits, and an ordinance adding the Class R3 liquor license classification. That's all.
All right, very good. Thank you. That brings us item 11, which is reserved for council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the village council to either report out on things going on in the community or other things of note, or to report out in their role as a liaison to a board or commission, whether it be the library board or stormwater committee or the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, the Downtown Management Corporation, et cetera, et cetera. I'll start with my far left, Commissioner Barnett.
No report, Mayor.
Very good. Commissioner Earl.
No report, Mayor.
Commissioner White.
No report.
Commissioner Jose.
Let's make it a clean sweep if we can. No report.
All right, Commissioner Waldeck, pressure's on.
I have a feeling it won't be a clean sweep, but
yes.
But I'm not going to do it. No report.
My fault.
Although the sweepers were out with the snow and ice today in the downtown, that was going on. It's Commissioner Wallace.
I'm going to do it.
Everyone's on the edge of their
spitballs,
seats.
please. I'm so nervous. Pizza Wars coming up February 28th at 5:30 at Downers Grove South High School. Tickets are $10 in advance, $15 at the door. They benefit a variety of teacher grants and student scholarships at North High, South High, and Transition 99. So go out and support our local schools and have some pizza. That is all, Mayor.
Thank you. And there are 3 Downers Grove pizzerias that are participating in this year's competition for who will be the Pizza War champion. Scuttlebutts, Teresa's, and Lou Malnati's are the 3 Downers Grove pizzerias that are participating. So if you want to support local pizza and education, yeah, we'll support education too. Make sure you go to Pizza Wars. See, great. Just,
You had to team up with me.
yeah,
I
had
see
to.
how that-
Had
you
to.
couldn't help
I'd
it.
let you-
That's okay.
That's the way it works.
Speedy or throwing?
All right, I'm not even going to touch that. With that, we are at the end of tonight's meeting. I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Mayor Kelly, I move the council adjourn.
And all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay.